Hi all. Happy Friday. It is Marnie Stockman and Chris Fix today, and we are doing bits and books. Um, and today's book is Bring Yourself by Mori Taheripour. And if I'm slaughtering that, I hope somebody corrects me on it. But the subtitle is How to Negotiate Fearlessly. So much good to talk about in here. Um, but the first thing before we start is I don't think people might think, why would I read a book around a negotiation? Like, I'm not a negotiator. I say false. If you are a parent or a colleague or go to the grocery store or ever have to check into an airport, you in fact are a negotiator. And it was a great book. So I'll just lead off with that. Chris, would you introduce yourself and tell me, are you a negotiator now that now that you've read the book?
I didn't think I was until I read the book. But yeah, hi, I'm Chris Dix. I'm the director of conversational interfaces at Cloud Radio as of not too long ago, and which just means I head up all the chat and AI development for Cloud Radio. And yeah, this was an eye-opening book for me in terms of the whether or not I thought I was a negotiator or what I thought negotiating meant or
Was.
when it happened, yeah, it was pretty eye-opening from that standpoint. I feel like I am a negotiator. I just didn't realize it.
Yeah. So, what I thought first, a little background on the author is she is a professor and is at Wharton Business School, right, where she teaches negotiation. So, I know there's Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator, right, which is, I think, a very different world of thinking of approach that it might take from. But what I loved about it is she gave examples of scenarios from the course that she teaches, but also of the people that are in the class. And I think she will say a lot of half the people come in thinking they're negotiators, right? They're like the salespeople, the business people who've got the background that you would expect, that they're the hard driving people that like play it tough. But then she talks about the folks, and I think we learn more from the folks that don't expect to be good negotiators, but in fact turn out to be good negotiators. So I think I think a lot of people might pick up the book or not pick up the book again, as we said, because they don't think they're a negotiator. But I would say I would encourage you, because this is, you negotiate with yourself even. So in the same way that I always say leadership is life, um, and you are a leader, even if you're not running a team, that negotiation falls in line with it. So you and I both had some interesting weeks and related it to the book. So I want you to go first and shout out to the folks at MSP GeekCon. What did you find in the book that you liked, and how did it connect to your week?
Yeah, no, so I was at MSP GeekCon year two. I was fortunate enough to be there the previous year as well. I'm going to try to make it a tradition.
An
It's a
annual
great
thing?
event.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was hoping Kyle would be here to tell him how great of a job they did setting everything up. So I would definitely encourage anyone in the MSP space and the community, whether you're an owner or a tier one or anything in between, to give it a shot. It's a really community focused event.
Yeah.
And a lot for everybody there. And so having just been there and reconnected with customers, with vendors, with friends. Um, uh, there were certain aspects of the book that struck a chord with me from that, and one of the things that it mentioned in there is that business is personal, and in this age, I mean, like you and I were doing, this remotely from wherever you are, wherever I am, and we've been doing this for a while now, and so much business is done remotely, and it works, but there's something to be said for that connection that happens at an in-person event like that. The random connections that happen, just coincidence or fate or whatever have you. Um,
Here, Smith. Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly. Um, that because so much of it changes when you're in person at an event like that, or you know, even that's something that's part professional, part social. There's really a different way of relating to people. And that was another thing that struck me in the book about how people see each other and how that was one of the keys of that she mentioned about negotiating. I can't remember who the quote was from, but saying that when two people meet, that there are really six people there, that there's, each of them as they see themselves, and each of them as they see each other, and then of
Yeah.
course as they actually are. And
Yeah.
so, that just multiplies in a group of three or four or something like that at an event like this. So it really just felt different and special to reconnect with some of those connections.
Well, and it's interesting. So I love the notion of two people meet, but six people show up, right? When you start thinking about that, you do start thinking about, am I showing up the way I want to be showing up? Um,
Yeah.
and I think the whole thing about leadership, that is the whole thing about negotiation, it is really about building those relationships, which, like you said, live is so much more impactful than virtually at times. And you mentioned something earlier about being genuinely interested in people really helps to build I think it narrows the scope of the who you think showing up, who is showing up, and who they think is showing up, right? Like the three people are closer to one if you can really listen. And I mentioned that I had an interesting week too. So yesterday, Nick and I wrote Lead It Like Lasso, and yesterday we had two things. One, our book won two awards, and it was displayed on the NASDAQ market site,
Oh,
Spinner in Times Square, which was surreal and amazing. Um, uh, but the second thing that I think really relates to what she talks about in this book is Robin Roberts from Good Morning America. Um, we waited after the show, and when she exited, she came over and talked with us. And I watched her talk with a lot of people, and she didn't just like hi, 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 high five on the way by hugs or whatever. She really listened to what everyone said and was so kind. In the book, there's the author puts, finally I thought a lot these past years about the emphasis I put on empathy. Now this is a book on negotiation, right? And so you don't necessarily think empathy. When you're able to put yourself in someone else's position and understand their life's journey, it gives you insight into how they make decisions, what they're moved by, what their interests are, and what they value. And I think connecting the dots between where I was and where you are, I think it is, I talk quarterly business reviews and customer success from this piece all the time. I think if you can have empathy for your clients, that's actually what I'm talking about today at this conference.
nice.
That you get to know your clients better, and then you can better serve them. Well, when we met Robin Roberts in the world of empathetic listeners, wow. I mean, she was on her way out, getting into her SUV, right? Like security had the door open, and she looked over and came over and talked to us. She asked security if they could move the barriers so that we could come give her a hug. And then there were three other people there as well. And then when I got to her, I said, we feel so fortunate to have you here. I was wondering if I could give you a copy of our book. She said, I would love that. And then she asked, so if I handed you something and you're in a rush to go home, right? And you're going to smile and take a picture, you'd like grab the book, say thanks, she's right. Like she took the book, and the subtitle is A Leadership Book for Life, Your Life, right? And she said, I love this type of book. Like, I like reading this. Like, she didn't, I don't know that I would have been able to scan a book title with five strangers around me, some of whom were hugging, like, but she looked at it and said, oh, I think I would like to read this book, right? Held it, took pictures, etc. So that actually happened on Wednesday. Thursday, we went back, and there were other people that got the book awards that were there. And so when she came out, this time she came out and was chatting with everyone. And Nick and I backed off because we had already met her. And as she was walking back in, she could tell there were two people she hadn't talked to yet. And she looked back and looked at Nick, and we had shirts with our book on it. And she looked at him and the shirt, and she said, "Oh, I have your book. Like, good luck today." She remembered who we were, the fact that we had said we were going to be on the NASDAQ. Like, it was really, I saw some of the other folks from there that were very much like smile high, smile high, smile high. But she would look at you, she would listen to you, like you felt heard, which is, I think, a lot of what this book talked about. Agree or disagree? Was that me just dreaming because I had a good moment with her?
No, well, that's a fantastic moment, first of all, and congratulations for all of
Thank
the
you.
success in the book. It's great. It's a great book. Um, no, I totally agree. Sorry, I'm not going to be like a point counterpoint with you. This is just we're going to pile on. But yeah,
No,
she
no, this is we can all be on the same
we'll
side
be
of
on the right
this.
side. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, she that level of I think the book called it, wherever you are, be there fully. Like
fully.
yeah, and
Yes.
I want to try to do that more, like the um to be actually genuinely curious about the person you're talking to, and who they are, why they're there, what's I
Yeah,
mean that. And I never really thought about that as part of a negotiation. And I mean, and it goes beyond being part of just a negotiation, but just any
yeah, yeah,
interaction, just to have that
yeah,
genuine curiosity and uh, really wanting to understand the other person, really, paying attention, and just it's partly empathy, it's partly curiosity, it's partly just being present.
So in a Facebook group today, somebody asked, "How do you focus on listening better?"
Mhm.
And I'm a talker, so I know it's something that I need to work on. And one thing that both this book and Ted Lasso, you've made the comment like be curious. So he always says be curious, not judgmental. Um, one thing that I put is one way to attempt to to get there. She said choose curiosity over certainty,
Mhm.
right? So if you can think, like you said, I'm not gonna be a counterpoint for you. Um, like if instead of saying like, oh, I'm sure this is right or I'm sure this is wrong, to be able to explore with curiosity what the other person is thinking, it does help you in negotiations, and it lines up to the other book we read, Think Again, about just we're not as far apart as we all seem.
Yeah,
And what I loved about this in negotiation is, they always say a compromise is a good one when both parties feel like they walk out like they're screwed, like they neither got what they want. But she's saying, in fact, that's not true. That if you really build the relationship and listen to what the other person wants, there's sometimes really creative ways to negotiate that can get everybody what they want, which you don't think of in negotiation. I think a lot of times you think like somebody's going to lose this.
yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying about there was a whole section towards the end of the book of that was a little political in nature, but
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
focused on um, not not coming to a conversation or a negotiation or whatever with those preconceived, you know, unchangeable thoughts. I mean, like there, of course there's right and wrong, and maybe the other side is just wrong, but coming at it from that point of view in terms of a communication is not going to make any progress in
yeah,
the real world. And so
yeah,
I liked that she kind of dealt with that and avoid that rejection of the other side's opinion outright. And in
yeah.
order to facilitate change, I thought was a interesting point.
So when you say that, one thing that I had struggled with historically is if I disagree with someone, I don't ever come at you from the other side and just say you're wrong. Like that, I don't like conflict, so I'm not going to do that. But I would often be quiet. And then some people thought that was like complicit
Mm,
agreement with it.
mm.
And what would really make me crazy is if they went into a meeting and said, well, Marnie and I were discussing this earlier, and we believe, oh, we do not believe. I was listening quietly, and you took that because I didn't say anything else, right?
Yeah,
So I thought, well, that's dangerous too. Like going at them wasn't going to accomplish anything, but being quiet almost got the same, like
yeah,
danger effect. So I need to learn how to ask the question to draw more out of it. Because one, the curiosity hopefully that lets them also know that like maybe there are a couple other ways to look at this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because the whole I don't want to get in a fight about it, but I also don't want you to think I agree with that. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. No, that's it's a difficult line to walk with a lot of these. I mean, if I guess it was easy, you wouldn't everybody would not have all these
Yeah,
fears
right.
about it. But, trying to walk that line between open-mindedness and preparation too, like she touched on preparation. Like, I mean, if you're going to
Yeah,
come into a negotiation or a conversation like this, you should have some preconceived thoughts about it. Yeah, but to have that flexibility of mind still,
yeah.
and flexibility of approach to communicating with the other person in order to maybe shift them a little in the direction
And
you
they're thinking,
need. Yeah. um, so
it's interesting because I talk QBRs all the time, right? And I was just doing a presentation, and Rex asked me, like, how do you get someone to move from you've historically had technical conversations and now you want to have a strategic conversation, right? That is a shift you're going to have, right? It's not so much a negotiation, but I beg to differ. Trying to get somebody to agree to sit down with a QBR is, in fact, sometimes a negotiation.
mhm,
Um, and it was the research that you mentioned, right? To do the homework. So many times I've heard MSPs talk about the doing the homework was them knowing what server they wanted to sell, what Optiplex 750, what,
mhm,
features and functions it would have, but not the research on what the other person wanted. And I think in any negotiation, so she talks about self awareness of knowing where you are, and that helps build guide rails for
mhm.
yourself. But then awareness of the other person can helps you can help you have the conversation to move them so you're in more alignment. And I have things for each of them. We'll start with the first one, which was like understanding your own guide rails. On page 8, she was talking about some self awareness, and then don't be your own worst enemy by negotiating with yourself, really understanding yourself. Um, and in the course of that chapter, I absolutely have negotiated with myself before. So I know that's something I have to let go. But a couple times in two different jobs that I can think of, I had all the leverage and it made me a very good negotiator, I thought. But I realized it wasn't the leverage that let me be a good negotiator. It was I had found my guide rails that had given me the mental leverage. So I knew where there was a hard no. And that did actually make it easier for me to negotiate. So I thought it was the leverage gave me the power. But in fact, it was I knew what I would do and what I wouldn't do. And so it's easy to be able to communicate clearly.
Yeah, I thought that was, I mean, she hit on that really early on in the book, is that a lot
Yeah.
of this is about
And
knowing
the Roman
your,
numerals.
the Roman, yeah. Um, like in what the situation you're describing, you knew your own value. Like you knew what your own worth was and had confidence in it. And that
Yeah.
it wasn't about leverage, it was about trusting your own value
Yeah.
and knowing like, hey, I'm pretty cool, like you're pretty cool. And so like so hey, yeah, they get just that sense of knowledge of your own worth as a
Yeah.
counter to the fear of I'd love to one of the other things I loved and I want to try is the she mentioned that game, the rejection therapy thing. I'd never heard of that before.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
where you just
Yeah.
go around and just ask things you're going to get no's for, and like
Yeah.
I
A
love that
hundred
idea.
no's, right? It
Yeah,
was,
right. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sort of just build up that sort of it's,
Immunity to the
yeah, immunity.
angst
That's a
of
good
it.
word. Yeah, yeah, just a
Yeah.
little just make you realize that it's not the end of the world when somebody says
Yeah.
no to something.
You're not actually going to die of embarrassment when you go and ask
Yeah,
for a discount and she started with simple stuff, right?
yeah,
Like it was not you're negotiating your salary. It was
yeah,
go to the store and ask for a discount for something and these
yeah.
little stuff.
Yeah, or like just asking a stranger for a ride, kind of thing. They're like, yeah, I mean, I guess you hope they say no. I guess.
Yeah, I know. Please, please,
Yeah,
please, please say no. I
yeah,
was in New York City. Please
yeah.
say no. I'm not going to do that here. Yeah.
No, but yeah, I just, I know it was right there in the title and everything, but I just never thought about how much of this, I mean, how much of everything we do is, either motivated by
Unnegotiated.
fear or changed by the fact that we can mitigate those fears. And,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's really a driving force in so much.
Um, I mentioned I'm at the summit where Juan Fernandez, and I wrote the MSP books together. And he always talks about knowing the no, that every time you get a no, it teaches you something, right? And he also says you probably walked in with that no. So if you've done enough research, you could have not hit that along the way, kind
Mm,
of with objection pieces. So it is very interesting how well this aligned with sales. And we're not talking enterprise, cutthroat, like everything you do is a
yeah,
negotiation. Um, so I mentioned the one about the guide rails, right, and knowing yourself, but then knowing others. Um, I think there was a quote on page 78 about Lincoln along the way doing this well, or not doing this well and having to learn it. When my daughter was 7, she stomps in from our shop and says, "Dad and David won't make me a rain stick." But she wanted some construction project. And I said, "Well, why would they?" And her answer was, "Because I want one," right? Like that was a very 7-year-old mentality.
mm,
And I said, "Baby girl, what is in it for them?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "All right, I'm going to teach you the first lesson. That's an adult lesson on how to think, but you can only use your powers for good, not evil." And it's sort of a running joke. The family will always say, "We're going to have to put mom on this, but she'll only use her powers for good, not evil." Like my husband's a big guy, and you would think if there was a heavy in the house, it'd probably be him. But if we're sending, companies to, it's like, just, you better deal with it with Frank. You don't want her. And I said, but Josie, what you need to do is this is going to take their time, right? It's going to pull them from a project that they want. They're doing things that they want to do right now. What could you do that would offset that would maybe make them want to make you this rain stick? And I said, so what's something that David would like, or what's something that David doesn't like that you could take away from him? And she said, and David was 9, and she was like, well, he doesn't like his turn doing the dishes. I said, so what can we learn from that? She said, oh, I could offer to clean dishes for him for a week if you make it. I was like, now you're talking. So she goes back up to the shop, and that little stinker, she comes back, she traded him 3 days of dishes. She had negotiated
negotiate. Yeah,
by
nice.
the time she got there. But like, I had to physically teach her. David's understood it from the beginning. Let's make it about the other person. But Josie, she actually, so I'm saying it's trainable. If I can train her,
Yeah, yeah.
that anybody can learn to think about what's in it for the other person.
Sounds like she was a bit of a natural too, though. But, so.
Well, I mean, what she is a powerful force to be reckoned with. And when she realized that using what other people want to get what she wants is actually a strategy and not a weakness, um, she then adopted that wholeheartedly.
Nice. That's awesome.
Kind of funny. Um, I'm looking at the quotes, like I've said before, I take a walk with the note card and the book, and then sure, if any of my neighbors were MSPs and watched this, they'd say like, "Oh, that's what that woman is doing out there on the walk all the time." Um, we've covered many of them, but one that we haven't talked about that I think is important in this channel is on page 99, page 89. It talks about transparency. Um, and there are a few things when they talk about what info to share versus what info to not share. And for the sake of transparency, is not permission to be a jerk, to be mean, to be hurtful. And transparency also doesn't mean that you have to say everything, right?
Right.
Because a negotiation does require nuance but you should never lie. Of course, people hold things back, but the more transparent you can be without being mean. I despise it when someone says, "Well, just to be transparent," and they say something hurtful.
Yeah, I hate that.
Makes me
So
angry.
yeah, I liked that that they dealt with that a little bit in the book. About she mentioned the one student um who kind of just bailed right at the start of the negotiation because she's like, well, I don't want to lie, like just
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
and that she had
Yep.
to kind of reconcile that, with that student, and in her own mind as well,
Yep.
is like it's not lying, but yeah, there are nuance, like you said. Um there's uh there's a lot of, it's not about being dishonest in any way,
Yeah. Yeah.
to not put all the cards on the table,
Yep.
to find that happy middle ground. So yeah, I liked it that they actually dealt with that, because yeah, for some people it is kind of a non-starter to approach it that way. But I
Yeah.
agree with you 100% about the transparency thing. I liked, I think it was when we read Being Naked,
Yeah. Getting naked.
Getting Naked. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I got to remember to get the titles exactly right, especially with those.
Especially
Um,
if someone's going to be
yeah,
Googling that
yeah,
one.
don't Google. Yeah, that they dealt with that as well. Just frankness, like a kind candor about
Yeah.
these things.
Yep.
So
Yep. Um, Brene Brown's book, Clear is Kind, right? It's not brutal at no
yeah,
point, just clear, right? And honest and refreshing. I love that, like, you have no idea what page numbers I've written down and that you can pull the actual story. I must have been reading. I'm not good about that. Like, I didn't remember what story was behind that. But I did think, just in terms of the book itself, I thought she did a great job of connecting the stories with actual tactical things that you do and scenarios that you got the opportunity to think about, where you could put yourself enough in the place. It wasn't like magical stories about Richard Branson jumping out of a hot air balloon where you're like, all right, well, that is never going to happen to me. I don't have to. You could really see, like, yeah, yep, this happens at the house or at the grocery store or at work. Um,
yeah,
did
yeah.
you feel the same way about it?
I did, and I liked how I mean, she talked about so many real people and real examples, and I know a lot of them were anonymous, or names
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
to,
yeah,
but
yeah,
then
yeah,
some of them weren't. She mentioned Hardy Nickerson. I'm like, well, I know who Hardy Nickerson is. He played for the Bucks or whatever. Like, and it's like, I mean, and it's like, and how how it affected him in terms of, a negotiation when he started becoming a coach instead of a player, and how that
yep,
changed, and have, doing his own negotiations and things like that. Real, but it felt real.
yeah,
These concrete
yeah,
examples of our
yeah,
students.
yeah. And the range, like, from people you have
Mm,
heard about to
mm.
just, somebody who owned a flower shop in her class, that type of thing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think was really
yeah.
interesting.
There were so
So is
many.
there anything, so many. I mean, and I, again, with the connections, she talked about the Wonder Woman pose, like, you should, believe in yourself, which that one always kind of cracks me up.
Oh yeah.
Um, have a, we've only got 8 seconds worth of attention. So, like, as something to keep in mind, empathy was a big theme, curiosity was a big theme, um, confirmation bias, right? What you think is going to happen is not always the case. So, how do you rethink for yourself? Um, the other thing that I've read quite a bit about recently is being comfortable with being uncomfortable, especially when it comes to opposing viewpoints, so that you can be open to listening. Because it's the discomfort that so many times causes people to not have the conversation, right? Or
Yeah.
to they either come at it oppositional or they flee from it. But if you can be comfortable in the space, that's how you can both grow and maybe grow together to a better negotiation outcome, etc.
Yeah, there were so many good things like that in there. The curiosity one, and I've been criticized for that stance before, like, but I'm going back to it now. Like, it's like, that's a, yeah, it's a good, and people called me on it for, like, it's like a power play or something like that. And in fact, it's like an
Yeah,
openness, like, really, like, I'm
and
like,
openness.
I'm
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
um, so that, and that and a little theme music to psych yourself up before something is, like, I feel
So,
like, you know,
so what would be your psych yourself up music?
oh, it's a variety. I'm pretty eclectic on that, but it's got to have a good beat.
Yeah, yeah,
I fall back to it's a mix of honestly a mix of rap, Motown, and hair metal, really. So,
Okay, I think that's all fair.
uh,
If you stop me on the street real quick, I'll probably say "Eye of the Tiger." The Rocky theme song. It's got the good beat, right? I
it's
see some kickboxing in there with it. Woo! Um, uh, but again, depends on the scenario,
it
and for
does.
sure, Eighth Wonder by Sugar Hill Gang. If I
Uh,
can cut out so you just get an appropriate segment of
okay,
that,
yeah, that's
that
a
gives you a
solid. That's a
fulfillment.
solid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'll even mix like I'm not too I'm secure in my self that I can throw a Katy Perry firework in there or something like that. Like
Oh,
it's like whatever,
fantastic.
it's
Yeah,
all a good running track. Like I can get out there
yeah,
and just
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah, Pharrell's Happy, I've definitely done as a walk-up song because that's sort of me. Not everyone
Nice.
puts me in that. Like if I stay in the Wonder Woman pose too long, they do think like that's not her. She's more abrasive. But yeah, we get there. So is there any other
Awesome.
themes or are you feeling like have we covered the general idea? Do you recommend the book, not recommend the book for MSPs? What do you think?
Yes,
Well, where
I
would it help
do.
them the most?
Yeah, I do recommend. I mean, I recommend it for anybody really at this point. Just anybody who's going to have any kind of uh, interaction with
Yeah,
people.
with any other human.
Yeah, if you talk to humans, then yeah, that
Yeah,
should be the
yeah,
blurb. Then,
yeah,
yeah,
I
no,
like
I
it.
mean, just it's so many lessons about being a more open and uh, uh, curious and relevant person in day-to-day life. It was good lessons.
I agree. Um, so before we hop off, I want to share the book we're going to do next time, which is always fun for me. So I talked to Marvin B today,
Yeah,
and he's going to join us next time.
nice.
And I let him pick the book. So monetizing innovation
Mm.
is the book. Can you see it? That we're going to go with.
Yes, cool.
And I think that so we're going from negotiating, right, to how to monetize innovation, which in technology and what you just mentioned, a like as long as you're chatting with humans, right, and not just
Right.
AI. I think this will be an interesting one to segue to because I think many times MSPs negotiate with themselves, which this book talks about how to not do that. And as we're looking at some tactics on monetizing innovation, how do you then negotiate so you can sell that that innovation? So I think that'll be a really good one to add to next time.
Nice. That's great. I did a podcast with him a while back when I was still on my own, and
Solo,
that was
yeah,
great. Yeah, and no, it was great. I look forward to next time. So
yeah. I'm excited to chat with him. I think that'll be fun.
cool.
We're glad we got to chat, and we'll see everybody next time.
Me too. Thanks. See you.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.